Flint kept his expression even. If he said too much, if the town got wind that Apache women were on his land, trouble could double in a day. Some men would claim he was harboring enemies. Others would use it as an excuse to stir up old grudges. "I just need to know if I should keep my rifle closer to the door," Flint said. "That is never a bad idea," Halle replied. Deputy said they might be ex-scout riders or deserters. Men like that value gold and easy gain. If they sniff out a place they think is empty, they might try to claim it. Flint left with a sack of salt, a box of nails, and a mind heavier than when he arrived. On the way back, he noticed tracks he had not seen before along a side trail. Hoof marks, multiple riders, heading toward the very ridge that rose behind Bramble Farm. They were not fresh, but not old either. Maybe 2 days? Maybe less. The path of the main conflict was riding itself across the dirt. Back at the farm, he found Ridge stacking firewood while Larka guided his hands to keep the pile steady. Nayeli stood near the fence, scanning the horizon. When Flint dismounted, she looked at him with a question already in her eyes. "You saw a sign," she said, not asking but stating. Flint nodded. "Tracks, men on horseback. Heading our way, sooner or later." Nayeli's jaw tightened. Then the time grows short. That evening, as the sky bruised with purple and gold, Flint and Nayeli walked the boundary together. Ridge stayed near the house with Larka, chasing the chickens away from the water trough. From the edge of the field, Flint could see the faint outline of old marker stones half buried in the dirt. He had seen them before but thought them just rocks. Nayeli knelt beside one and brushed away the soil, revealing carvings worn but clear. "These were placed long before you came?" she said quietly. "A sign between my people and those who lived here. A promise that no blood would be spilled on this ground unless forced." Flint crouched beside her, tracing the lines with rough fingers. "Then what happened to the folks who made that promise?" Nayeli's eyes stayed on the stone. "Some left. Some died. Some were pushed away when others forgot the promise. But the land does not forget. That is why we came here when we had no place else to go. This ground remembers peace." Flint thought about the men Halle described, deserters, raiders. If they came to this abandoned farm expecting easy shelter, they would not care about old stones or ancient agreements. To them, the land would be nothing more than a place to sit, drink, count stolen coins, and move on. The idea of that kind of violence spilling onto this soil made Flint's chest tighten. "There is another reason we chose this place," Nayeli said, almost reluctant. Flint watched her carefully. "What reason?" She did not answer right away. Instead, she glanced back at the house where Ridge and Larka's laughter floated faintly on the air. Then she looked toward the darkening ridge. "The men chasing us," she said at last, "are not only thieves. They hunt something they believe we know. Something tied to this farm." Flint stared at her. "What could possibly be tied to this place that men like that would chase you across the frontier?" Nayeli rose to her feet. "Long ago, a man who lived here hid something of great value, not gold, but something men would kill for if they understood it. My people tried to help him keep it safe. He trusted us. In his last days, he passed his secret into the care of our camp." Flint's mind raced. A hidden stash, a map, information from an old war. There were too many possibilities. "And those men think you know where it is. They think we carry the path to it," Nayeli answered. Flint studied her. "Do you?" She looked at him then with a gaze that felt ancient. "We carry something," she said. "Enough to make them chase us. Enough to make this farm more dangerous than you knew when you bought it." Inside the house, a pot simmered. Larka hummed a low, soothing song while Ridge set the table. The scene looked peaceful through the window, but Flint felt none of that peace. He understood now that the conflict was not just between settlers and Apache, or between raiders and an unlucky single-dad rancher. It was wrapped around the land itself, around secrets buried in the dust. Later, while Ridge slept, Flint worked in the yard making quiet preparations. He moved the extra wagon boards closer to the porch. He checked the hinges on the door and the strength of the shutters. Nayeli watched without comment, then finally spoke. "You are preparing to fight?" she said. I am preparing to protect my boy, Flint replied, and anyone under my roof. Nayeli looked toward the stars rising one by one. We do not seek battle. We have already lost too much. I do not seek it either, Flint said. But if those men come here thinking this is an easy place to take, they will find it is not. In the soft light of the lantern, Larka sat at the table, her bag open for the first time since they arrived. Flint caught a glimpse of what was inside. Folded rawhide, a small bundle of wrapped cloth, carved beads, and a strip of painted leather that looked older than any of them. When Larka noticed his gaze, she pressed the bag closed, her eyes shining with quiet fear. It is not gold, she said, voice barely above a whisper. But it is worth more to our people than any coin. Flint nodded slowly. And they know that. The men on the ridge, Larka swallowed hard. They believe if they hold what we carry, they can trade it to powerful men in town. Gain favor. Gain money. Gain power. Flint understood then. This was not just a simple raid. It was a hunt for leverage. Something that could tilt the fragile balance between settlers, soldiers, and Apache even further. Night settled deeper over the farm. Coyotes cried in the distance. The abandoned fields lay silent and dark, holding their long memory. Inside the small house, 3 adults and 1 boy moved carefully around each other, their stories now tangled together whether they liked it or not. Flint lay awake on his pallet, listening. At some point he heard soft footsteps and knew Nayeli was checking the windows again. He heard the faint rustle of Larka's bag as she shifted it closer to her side. He heard Ridge's slow, easy breathing and held on to it like a lifeline dot as the fire burned low. A distant sound slipped through the quiet. Hoofbeats, faint, far off, but real. Not thunder? Not wind. Flint's eyes snapped open. He rose slowly and crossed to the window. Out beyond the field, near the dark line where the ridge began, a flicker of light moved. Then another. Lanterns or campfires. Too many for a simple traveler or lone rider. Without a word, Nayeli appeared at his side. Larka sat up, clutching her bag. Ridge stirred in his sleep, unaware of the shadows forming beyond the farm. The men on the ridge, Nayeli whispered. Flint stared into the dark. Feeling the full weight of the conflict pressing in on the abandoned farm he had hoped would be a safe haven, they had not yet come to the house. But they were close enough to change everything when morning came. Flint stayed at the window long after the faint lights near the ridge disappeared behind the dark sweep of the trees. The hoofbeats had faded too, but the heaviness in the air stayed behind, pressing on his chest like a weight he could not move. The abandoned farm no longer felt abandoned. It felt watched, surrounded. The land that once promised peace now held a strange, tightening silence that warned of the storm moving closer. Nayeli stood beside him with her arms crossed, her shadow stretching long across the wooden floor. Larka held her bag close as she checked the shutter latches, her movements careful but tense. Ridge still slept, unaware that danger was creeping toward the only home he had known in months. Flint felt a fire grow inside him, a fierce need to protect the boy no matter what came down from the ridge. They will not attack at night, Nayeli said quietly. These men prefer daylight. They want to see who they are threatening. They want their victims to see them too. Flint grimaced. The thought of strangers riding toward his home under the open sun stirred something old in him, something tied to every hardship he had lived through. He had seen trouble come slow and quiet before. He had fought it off with sheer will when he had no one but Ridge. Now he had 2 women under his roof who carried secrets that drew trouble like dust to wind. We need to be ready then, Flint said. At first light? Nayeli nodded. There is another thing. These men will not approach the farm from one direction. They will circle. They know how to trap. Flint stared at her. You have dealt with people like this before. Nayeli's eyes darkened. Yes. She didn't say more, but the pain beneath her voice told him enough. Flint waited until she looked up again. Then we prepare in every direction. They spent the rest of the night planning in low voices. Flint checked the barn doors and pulled the horses deeper into the shadows. Nayeli walked the field edges, feeling the soil with her palms as if the land itself whispered to her. Larka prepared strips of cloth soaked in water, stuffing them in cracks around the window frames, though she never explained why she insisted on it. Flint trusted her anyway. When dawn finally broke, it came pale and tired, like the sun itself hesitated to rise over the ridge. Ridge ran to Flint, rubbing his eyes and asking why everyone was awake so early. Flint knelt and placed a steadying hand on his son's shoulder. "Stay close today," he said gently. "Do not leave the yard. Do not go near the barn unless I tell you." Ridge looked at Nayeli and Larka standing near the porch, their faces set in quiet determination. "Something bad is coming," he whispered. Flint swallowed. "Something dangerous. But we're here together. That counts for a lot." The boy nodded, trusting him with the kind of trust that squeezed Flint's heart tight. By mid-morning, a distant rumble carried across the land. Nayeli stiffened. Flint felt the vibration under his boots. A cluster of riders was approaching from the upper trail. Dust rose in thin spirals behind them. Flint counted 6 shadows at first, then 7. Maybe 8. He moved Ridge into the house, keeping the boy behind the doorway while he stood near the porch. Nayeli and Larka stayed inside too, but Nayeli remained close enough to the open window to watch. Flint's shotgun leaned against the doorway, not raised but ready. He didn't want bloodshed on this land. But if he was pushed, he would protect what mattered. The riders reached the lower slope and slowed. Flint recognized the kind of men Hele had warned him about. Hard faces carved by greed, not survival. Boots that hadn't walked a day without stepping on someone weaker. Their horses twitched with nerves as if even the animals sensed the wrongness riding on their backs. One man pushed forward. His beard was patchy, his hat torn at the edge, and his eyes carried the hungry kind of look Flint had seen in men with nothing left to lose. "This place deserted," the man called out. "We'll be taking a look around?" Flint kept his voice firm. "Not deserted. Bought it fair and proper. Property of Flint Harlow and my son. You ain't got business here." The man smirked. "Heard there were Apache on this land. Maybe hiding something valuable." Flint felt the heat rise in his chest, but he kept his stance solid. "There's no Apache here that concern you. No treasure either. You're wasting your time." The man's smile sharpened. "A farm like this, middle of nowhere. Plenty of hiding places. Plenty of ground that ain't been dug yet." Flint gripped the doorframe. He didn't lift the gun. Not yet. Violence would only trigger more violence. The men studied him, trying to read his fear or weakness. They saw neither. Flint had stood against storms men like them couldn't imagine. Another rider climbed off his horse. He was quiet, eyes narrowed like snake slits. He stepped toward the barn, testing the boundary Flint had laid out with his words. Flint took one step off the porch. "That barn is mine," he said. "Everything on this land is mine. You step into it without permission, I'll take it as trouble." The quiet rider paused, then smirked and turned back. "Not worth the effort right now," he muttered. They circled, looking at the house, the fields, the tree line. Flint could feel Nayeli's presence behind him through the wall, her silence a steady force. Larka kept Ridge close, whispering to him in a low voice, likely telling him stories to keep him calm while the air thickened with danger. The bearded man tilted his head, studying the doorway behind Flint. "Funny thing," he said slowly. "Tracks near the ridge said 2 women passed through here. Apache, but I don't see any company around." Flint forced his breath steady. "Tracks lead all over this land. Doesn't mean they're mine? You're looking in the wrong place." The man's eyes sharpened. Maybe you're hiding them." Flint's jaw tightened. "I don't hide people from men like you. I protect them from men like you." The quiet following his words felt like a rope pulled tight between 2 teams of horses. For a second, Flint wondered if he had pushed too far. The bearded man's smile died. His eyes narrowed in a way that made the air colder. "So you admit someone's here?" Flint didn't move. "I admit you won't find anything you're looking for on this land." The man stepped closer. "We'll search anyway. Before Flint could respond, Nayeli stepped outside, quietly, gracefully, without fear. Larka followed behind her, Ridge close to her side. Flint's heart thudded once, hard, but he didn't stop them. Nayeli had chosen her moment, the bearded man's eyebrows rose. Well now? Looks like we were right. Nayeli's voice was calm. You have no reason to be here. We got plenty, the man replied. You owe us something. Nayeli stepped forward. We owe you nothing. The man's smirk returned, uglier this time. We heard you had something of value. Something passed to your people. Something worth a fortune. You hand it over and we leave quiet. Flint watched Larka clutch her bag tighter. The man's gaze flicked to it, hungry. Nayeli shifted instantly, standing between Larka and the riders. You do not understand what you ask for, Nayeli said, her voice cold as steel. What we carry has meaning you cannot grasp. It is not for you. The quiet rider edged his horse closer. Meaning don't matter. Price does. Flint stepped forward, placing himself beside Nayeli. You're on my land. You'll leave it. The bearded man's voice dropped. We leave without what we came for, and maybe we're back with more men. Maybe we burn the place down. Maybe we don't leave at all. The threat hung heavy. Flint felt Ridge press into Larka's side. Larka's hands trembled, but she held the bag close like it was her. Heartbeat, Nayeli's gaze locked with Flint's. For the first time since they met, her eyes showed fear. Not for herself. For Ridge, for Larka, for all of them, Flint spoke again, louder this time. If you think you can scare a father off his land, you picked the wrong farm. The bearded man barked a cold laugh. We'll see about that. He jerked his chin at the others. They spread out slowly, tightening the circle around the farm. Flint could feel the tension climbing like a rising storm. Nayeli shifted her stance, her body angled, ready. Larka stepped back, pulling Ridge toward the house. The quiet man dismounted again. This time he headed not toward the barn, but toward the well. He kicked at the dirt around it and grinned. Someone's been digging here, he said. New ground. Flint's stomach twisted. Ridge had helped him clear weeds around the well 2 days ago, but the man didn't know that. The riders jumped on the idea like wolves scenting meat. Could be something buried? One muttered. Could be the treasure. Another added. Larka shook her head fiercely. There is no treasure. You are chasing lies. The bearded man laughed. You carry that bag like treasures inside it? You holding out on us. Larka stepped back again, clutching the bag like she feared it would be ripped from her hands. Nayeli stepped forward. Flint felt the air shift. The riders started closing in. The bearded man raised a hand, and the moment before, chaos could break loose. One of the horses reared sharply, neighing in panic. The quiet man spun around, startled. Nayeli stiffened. Larka sucked in a breath. Something moved on the ridge, a shadow. Larger than a rider? Larger than a man. Flint's heart slammed in his chest. Whatever was coming toward them was not part of the raiders' plan, and whatever was hidden beneath this land's old history was about to rise into the open the moment that shadow moved across the ridge. Every rider on the ground froze. Even the horses felt the shift, stamping and snorting like the earth itself carried a warning. Flint didn't know what he was seeing at first. The shape was tall, deliberate, gliding along the ridge with confidence. When the figure stepped forward into the pale sunlight, Flint saw the truth. It wasn't a ghost or a creature. It was a man. A single Apache elder wrapped in a long deerskin coat, his hair silvered with age, his posture steady as a mountain tree that had stood through 100 storms. The riders stiffened like startled cattle. They hadn't expected anyone else to show up, especially not from the high ridge. The bearded man cursed under his breath. Flint felt the tension twist, holding the air so tight that even Ridge seemed to stop breathing. Nayeli's eyes widened with quiet recognition. Her breath trembled, then steadied, and Flint knew she understood who the elder was. Larka clutched her bag even closer, her fear melting into something deeper. Respect? Hope. The elder descended the ridge slowly. every step measured like he walked with the weight of history behind him. When he reached the open field, he stopped between the riders and the farm, placing himself directly in the path of danger. The wind brushed his coat, carrying the faint scent of sage. His voice rose strong and clear, speaking first in Apache. The sound was deep, commanding, filled with meaning Flint could not translate but felt in his bones. Nayeli stepped forward beside Flint, answering the elder in the same tongue. Her voice carried a mix of reverence and relief. Larka joined her, bowing her head slightly as if greeting someone she never thought she'd see again. The riders shifted uncomfortably, uncertain what was happening. Their brows tightened, suspicion rising, fear mixing with greed. The bearded man spat on the ground. "Enough of that. Speak where we can understand." "Who is he?" Flint kept his voice steady. "Someone you shouldn't have forced down this ridge?" The elder turned toward the riders, his eyes sharp as flint stone. When he spoke in English, it carried the same authority. "This land does not belong to you. It is not for you to take. And what these women protect is not treasure. It is a trust. A legacy." The bearded man scoffed. "Legacy doesn't fill pockets. We came for what's in that bag. You stand aside or you fall with them?" The elder did not move. "You will leave this place." The riders exchanged looks. It was clear they didn't want to back down, but something about the elder unsettled them. Maybe it was his calm? Maybe it was the way Nayeli and Larka stood behind him like he carried their entire hope in his hands. Or maybe it was the land itself, hushed and waiting, as if every stone was listening. Flint stepped beside the elder, standing shoulder to shoulder. He didn't raise his shotgun. He didn't need to. His message was clear in the stance of his body. Ridge peeked from behind Larka, trusting his father completely. "You heard him," Flint said. "This is my land. My home. You don't belong here." For a long moment the riders simply stared. The bearded man's jaw clenched. The quiet man's eyes flicked toward the ridge, the barn, the house, calculating whether the fight was worth it. The other riders felt their horses trembling beneath them, as if the animals sensed more danger than the men could see. Finally, one rider muttered, "This ain't worth it. Too many eyes watching. Too many stories on this land." Another nodded. "Let's go. There's easier places than this." The bearded man hesitated, his greed pulling at him like a rope. But even he felt the pressure of something larger than himself, something that wouldn't break no matter how hard he tried. He spat again, glared at Flint, then snapped his reins. "You better hope we never cross paths again," he growled. The riders turned their horses, one by one retreating back toward the ridge. The bearded man was the last to leave, casting one final glare before disappearing behind the brush. The moment their hoofbeats faded, the tension broke like a rope finally cut loose. Flint let out a slow, shaky breath. Nayeli stepped closer to Ridge, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. Larka leaned into the elder, her relief clear in her trembling fingers. Flint watched Ridge run into his arms, and he held his son tight. Feeling gratitude wash through him, the elder finally turned to Flint, his expression softer now. "You protected them," he said. "You protected what they carried?" Flint nodded. "I didn't know what it was. I just knew they needed a place to stand." The elder's gaze drifted to Larka's bag. "Inside that bag is a piece of our history. A map drawn by one of our ancestors. Not a map to treasure, but a map of safe places. Sacred places. Routes used by those who traveled in peace. If it ever fell into greedy hands, it would bring ruin." Flint exhaled slowly. "So those men lied? There was no treasure." The elder smiled faintly. "Knowledge is the greatest treasure and the most dangerous." Nayeli stepped forward. "We guarded it after our camp was destroyed. Larka's father died protecting it. We promised to keep it safe." Flint looked at the two women with new understanding. Their fear, their caution, their silence all made sense now. They weren't running from trouble. They were carrying something that mattered too much to lose. Ridge tugged at Flint's sleeve. "Are they staying with us now?" Nayeli exchanged glances with Larka. Flint felt something warm stir inside him at the idea. The farm didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive, as if the land had been waiting for more than just him and Ridge. The elder placed a hand on Naeli's shoulder. You may stay if you choose, but the path forward is yours to walk. Larka stepped closer to Flint. Her voice was soft. We have nowhere else. And this place feels like home. Flint's throat tightened. Then you stay as long as you want. This farm is big enough for all of us. Naeli gave him the smallest smile he had seen from her yet. Ridge grinned, running to show Larka the trail behind the barn. Larka followed, laughing gently as Ridge pointed out the chickens and the broken wheelbarrow. Flint still hadn't fixed. Flint turned to the elder. What happens now? The elder looked toward the ridge, the same ridge that once brought fear but now carried calm. Now the land breathes again. The storm is past, and a new story begins. One built on trust and old promises renewed. He pressed a carved bead into Flint's hand. A symbol, a blessing, a sign of shared ground. Then he turned and walked back toward the ridge, disappearing into the same sunrise he had stepped out of. Flint watched him go, feeling the last of the tension lift like morning mist. Naeli stood beside him, her eyes following the elder until he was gone. This land chose you, she said softly. It chose your boy, and it chose us. That is why we felt safe here. Flint looked around the farm. The old fences, the weathered barn, the home he had almost walked away from on his first night. Now it held more life than he had ever expected. Seems we all came here for a reason, he said. Larka and Ridge's laughter drifted through the air. Naeli watched them, her face full of something warm and steady. Flint felt it too. A new beginning. A new family. A farm no longer abandoned. Ridge ran back and grabbed Naeli's hand. Come on, he said. We have a lot to fix and a lot to make better. Naeli looked at Flint with a gentle certainty. Perhaps this is where our path always led. Flint nodded. Then let's build something worth keeping. Together they stepped toward the house, carrying hope, history, and a future brighter than any they had imagined when they first crossed this land. The abandoned farm was abandoned. No longer Dotted had found its people, and they had found home.